So our eyes and our minds tend to gravitate towards the big things in life. And this is all over the place. Viral videos, popular social media. We talk about clickbait, how our media, how a lot of our news, especially on the internet, is driven by fancy titles that make you want to click on something. One weird trick to cure literally everything that ever bothered you, literally ever. Click here. And it all works to tantalize us. It all works to grab our attention, to fixate us, and to move us forward. And to really dig it into something. Just as the way we're wired. And in our gospel reading today, our minds go right away to the miracle of the loaves and fishes. And let's be honest, this is a big deal. It's downright magical, right? This is like somebody's lunch or half a lunch, a few loaves of bread, a couple fish at best, and it's feeding 5,000 plus people, because in the scripture, that 5,000 is only meant to count the men, and so it invites us to consider that not only were there 5,000 men, but thousands of women and children beside, and even after that, there were 12 loaves left over. That's a feast. Sounds a little like Easter Sunday here at the church with all of the sausage and all of the bacon and and somehow it just comes out of nowhere. So it's a big deal. It's magical, but our eyes tend to only see that big viral moment out of Scripture. I don't think in this text it's the only miracle here. Jesus invites us to consider all sorts of magic. The first miracle that we see in this text is the miracle of retreat. In the beginning of the passage, we're left with the end of some sort of statement. If you heard it, it sort of is like, well, when Jesus heard this, and no one tells us exactly what this is. You have to go back and read the beginning of the chapter, and what you see is what this was the beheading of John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin. If you remember this story, the beheading of John the Baptist was a move of cowardice. It was a move of craven power. It was a move to satisfy somebody in Pilate's family. It wasn't even meant to have any sort of retribution. It was just for pleasure. And moreover, it was done to a family member of Jesus. John was Jesus' cousin. And in the midst of this, Jesus recognizes that he has to retreat. This is something that Jesus does a lot in the Gospels. When things get overwhelming, when things get difficult, he recognizes that it is time to walk away. And oftentimes when he walks away into the wilderness, which for us should be a cue when we see that in Scripture for the thin spaces where God meets God's beloved. Jesus wanders through the wilderness for 40 days as he prepares himself for ministry. When Elijah fights the prophets of Baal and needs to run away, he goes into the wilderness to hear God's simple, quiet breeze calling him out. Moses heads to the wilderness to see the burning bush. And let's not forget that the people of God wandered in the wilderness for 40 days before the promised land. And there might be no other time that the people of God are so intimately connected to God, God's self, than when they wander in the wilderness. In hearing this terrible tragedy, Jesus recognizes that it is time to walk away for a little bit, to meet God. I think this reminds us that we as humans are not built for the type of world that is often demanded of us. That we have to be viral clickbait people ourselves, that we have to be tantalizing, that we have to be the one that works the longest hours amongst our friends. We have to be the one who's most engaged about what's going on in the culture, the one who's most woke amongst our friends, the one who knows what's going on and knows all of the answers. So when the difficult moments come, we feel like we're the ones who are performing the magic, and Jesus is not doing that kind of magic. Instead, the miracle that he's doing is the recognition that he can't do it all, and the best thing he can do is go meet his Father. When the world showed Jesus Christ its most evil, Jesus took time to meet God. This is the miracle of retreat, the miracle of connection with God. But of course, we see that Jesus doesn't remain there, even when he had the opportunity to do so. Even when the disciples were giving him all sorts of reasons not to deal with the crowd that was wandering their way. You know, Jesus, the disciple, says, listen, it's cool that they're following you, but there's a KFC back in their house. Why don't you just have them go get a couple buckets of chicken, stay at home? Be a lot easier. It's 10:30 at night. I'm tired. We've been walking all day. You've been in a boat in the wilderness. What's the point, Jesus? Didn't you just hear that your cousin was beheaded, Jesus? Just send him away. He could have taken the disciples' lead and sent the people away. But it was the deep compassion that Jesus felt. And this word that's used in the Greek, we've talked about a couple times here at Old Stone. It was a deep compassion, a body-rending compassion. The translation of the Greek literally means that Jesus' insides were tearing apart in feeling for these folks. So much so that Jesus brought them in and cared for them. Our second miracle here is our ability to feel deeply and nearly painfully for others leads to care even beyond our tired bodies. If I've said it 1 week, I've probably said it, 12 or 15 weeks by now. This is a trying time, and we're tired. The world, for better or for worse, is constantly showing us more of its evil side than we probably want to have to deal with. Sometimes we've got to walk away. But it's that compassion for the other that gnaws at us, that speaks more deeply than what we can even speak at the time, carries us forward. That's the miracle of compassion. And then finally in the gospel, we do get to this magical moment of just a few fishes, a couple side dishes turning into Old Country Buffet, which hopefully none of y'all are going to right now because that seems really scary. The miracle of abundance. And I think the loaves and fishes story, if we just read it as it is and we take a little literal reading of it, we presume that Jesus is somehow magic. And I don't want to deny the fact that perhaps Jesus was not a miracle worker. He absolutely was. He healed the sick. But I wonder what it's like to read this story again about the loaves and fishes through the lens of Isaiah. It reminds us that there is so much that we're apt to do that doesn't lead to miracles and doesn't lead to abundance. Because, friends, why do we always need to seek the big thing? Why do we always need to seek the big answer, the magical thing? Why do we need to be the heroes or the strong ones? Why do we give in to these temptations? And why might we do it now, perhaps more than any other time? And I think it's because we might think that there is real abundance there. I am craving abundance. I was craving abundance when I watched shelves stocked with nothing but the soup that nobody wanted. No one likes Manhattan clam chowder. And that's all that was on the shelves. I craved abundance. I crave abundance of people gathered together. I crave the connections that I feel like I'm missing now. I walked with a friend outside today, and I realized I hadn't walked with somebody outside that wasn't related to this church or related to me in 4 months. And it was amazing how heartbroken I felt once I realized that. And I'm very thankful to my friend Jeff, my colleague over at Marysville Pres, that we had a chance to walk together. But I crave that abundance. And so maybe I'm willing to be more of a superhero. Maybe I think I'm invincible. Maybe I think I need to do things that are way out beyond. I need to do the clickbait thing. I need to do the viral thing. I need to do the thing that will really show how strong and brave and smart I am, because I crave the abundance of seeing the small fish and loaves that I have become food for thousands. I hope for it. But Isaiah reminds us that the source of that abundance might be the one thing that really isn't all that exciting, and that is listening to God. That perhaps in the quietness and emptiness of the wilderness that sometimes we have to go to, that we have been provided perhaps more than we'd want to right now, is where God can speak and provide the wealth and abundance that we truly seek right now. Friends, here's the thing. The best part of all of this story is that most of these miracles are not supernatural. This is not magic here. They are things that we can do here and now. That perhaps there is a miracle to happen when we are willing to hear the brokenness of this world and to seek God's counsel, but also not turn away from those who are hungry for a cure. Friends, there's still people protesting. There are still people crying out for justice. There are sick people hungry for a cure. It doesn't have to be viral or clickbait or fancy, but those folks are out there. And perhaps our ability to walk away into the wilderness to hear God's voice and then feel the compassion Jesus did, listen, that's not magic, but it is a miracle. And that is the miracle of Jesus Christ that you can do too. Your simple phone call, your simple text message, your simple email, your Facebook message, anything is a way that you acknowledge in the wilderness that there is still people who are gut-wrenchingly feeling the pain of others. The only miracle there is time. But it's a miracle of Jesus Christ that you can do as well. To be willing to pour ourselves out when we've been in the wilderness, where perhaps we have the opportunity to stay hidden away for a while. To be with those people who are hungry, that is also a miracle of Jesus Christ that you can do right now. If any of you have the ability to turn some fish and some loaves into food for 5,000 plus people, awesome, let me know. And I will revise this sermon, but my guess is you can't. But here are the miracles you can do. And even still, when it comes to this miracle, again, if we just look at it as something literal, yeah, we can't do it. But we can invite people to the abundance of Jesus Christ. Not in what it costs us, but in what is free and what multiplies. The gifts of Jesus Christ, the way that we are heard, the way that we are loved, the way that we are cared for, cost us nothing. But if we give it freely, if we give what we have, if we listen deeply, if we look for the things that aren't satisfying because they're fancy, but because they are what drives us in the day-to-day, friends, that is a miracle of Jesus Christ. The abundance of Jesus Christ that multiplies beyond what we see, that is a miracle that you can live into right now. It is in you today. Yeah, you can't make magic. We're never going to turn 2 fish and 5 loaves into food for 5,000 people. But brothers and sisters, as sure as I am standing here talking to you today, you can be a miracle worker. You can do the thing that can change people's lives because you feel an overwhelming compassion. Because the brokenness of this world draws you to seek God in the wilderness. But you don't stay there. You don't need to be fancy. You don't need to be magic. You don't need to be a superhero. You don't need to prove to anybody that you work harder than anybody, that you're smarter than anybody. All you have to do is be the miracle worker that God made you to be. Thanks be to God.